Brilliant. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. And for those of you that I haven't met, just a really quick introduction. My name's Molly and I'm the Events Executive here at Kent and Medway Chamber. It's my absolute pleasure this morning to introduce you to this webinar. We'll be discussing supporting visible and invisible disabilities in the workplace. Through this event, we'll be discussing how to be more disability friendly, how to increase your confidence and awareness to support disabled candidates and employees, as well as increase your diversity into your workforce and introduce a different perspective as well. The event today is being held in partnership with the GradForce team. GradForce work exclusively with underrepresented groups within Canterbury Christchurch University. So to ensure that when candidates leave uni, they have an equal opportunity to transition into graduate level employment. The work they do is absolutely fantastic. So if anyone is looking to hire soon, if you're already hiring and you're open to the idea of hiring a recent graduate, then please do get in touch. The team are here today so they can answer any questions you have, and I'm sure maybe pop their email addresses in the chat. I'm sure they'll be absolutely happy to help and have a further conversation with you. Really quick introduction from me today. I'll probably hand over now to our speaker for today, which is Charlotte, and I believe she'll introduce and give a bit more information on herself for you.
Good morning, everybody. Hello there. Can I just first ask, can everybody see my screen with the first slide?
Yeah, that's all up there for you.
Okay, right, lovely. Okay, so yes, my name is Charlotte Good and I am an Enterprise and Engagement Manager. Thank you for attending today. It's a really positive signal to me that people want to be more inclusive in their hiring and to welcome diversity into the workplace, which is fantastic. So thank you for coming today. Just to give you a little bit of background on me, I started working at the university just over 6 years ago, and I actually came in as a careers advisor. And about a year into the job, I was asked to lead on a project to help improve the employability of our disabled students. It's something I'd never done before. And of course I said yes. And it was such an interesting project. It was really insightful and it really opened my eyes. And I found that when I was out and about, I suddenly realised that disability was everywhere. And that was only the disabilities that I could see. So just really interesting. I met lots of amazing students along the way. I used to do workshops and lots of one-to-ones. And sadly, after 2.5 years, our department was completely restructured and the role no longer existed. So my role now is business facing. But Louise, project manager for GradForce, knew what I used to do, and she asked if I would help with the GradForce project to help underrepresented groups. So I did a presentation with students last week, and here we are today doing a different presentation for employers. So I want to start by saying that if you're my age group or older, you may share my experience of what it was like when we were young. So for me, disability was something that wasn't really spoken about when I was at school. And I could even go as far as saying it was brushed under the carpet. And it's really sad to think back. I think back about some kids that I went to school with who were labelled as stupid or slow or clumsy or odd. And I look back and I think, is it possible that they were actually dyslexic, dyspraxic, or autistic? And although these are all labels, thankfully, labels today come with more support and more understanding. So things have really moved on. So during the project, I met a couple of students that I want to start by speaking about. And one student was Chris, who was with our business school, studying for a degree in business and human resources management. And he came to one of my workshops, and there were several students booked onto the workshop, but he was the only one that came. So we managed to have a really good chat. And to me, Chris was a model student. He didn't actually need my workshop because he had it all sussed out. And I don't mean that he was arrogant. He just was a model student. So for example, before he came to university, he decided to take a year out to do some volunteering work, to give something back and to build up his skill set. And while he was at university, he worked during the holidays, excuse me, and worked for an HR consultancy firm who offered him a graduate job when he graduated with a first. Now, Chris has cerebral palsy. He is a wheelchair user. And his hobbies were archery and swimming because he wanted to maintain upper body strength. So he graduated, walked straight into a job, which didn't surprise me at all. But unfortunately, the company ran into some difficulties further down the line, had to downsize, and Chris was made redundant. So he didn't want to have to go home and lose his independence. So he went on to Kent University to do a master's excuse me, at CIPD level 7. And we've always stayed in contact. And when he finished his master's, then he struggled to get work. He applied for up to 30 jobs. And I know I tried to champion him with a couple of organisations that I knew had openings, and he just could not get work. But never one to be held back. He thought, well, if I can't get a job, I'll create my own. So he started up his own HR consultancy firm with a business partner and is thriving to this day. Another student I would like to mention was a student named Ben, also a wheelchair user. And Ben came to one of my workshops very late. And the reason he came late was because he was a student at our Broadstairs campus that we had at the time. So when he came down to Canterbury, he automatically went to our main campus. Now, if any of you know Canterbury Christ Church University, you'll know that we have property sprawled out all over the city. But my workshop was actually in the library, which was a 15-minute walk away. It was pouring with rain, and a lot of students would have thought, you know what, I'm wet, I'm late, I might as well go home. But not this student. He wheeled his chair through the rain, got to my workshop late, apologising profusely, took part in the workshop and came to future workshops with me. I did actually go up to Broadstairs after that to deliver. And again, Ben graduated. I contacted a company on his behalf one time where we knew a vacancy was coming up, and he was very sensible about it. He wanted to contact the company. He wanted to see if he could visit, to check accessibility and to have a chat to see if it was a right fit for him and for the company. And I'm afraid we got fobbed off. And as far as I know, Ben is doing freelance work, working for himself as well. And I'm sure you'll share my frustration that it's not easier for these students, because I would absolutely champion these students and recruit them in a heartbeat. But as you probably already know, it's very difficult. So anyway, I've talked enough for my introduction, so let's crack on. And we are going to start with a short discussion about disability. And then if you could please keep any questions until the end. Please don't put them in the chat. If you could keep them to the end, because you will find that a lot of your questions will automatically get answered with the information coming. And I should point out that this is a general overview to get you started if this is the first this kind of training that you've come to. And I would recommend that you might want to look at further training, especially if you have an employee or you're about to welcome an employee with a known condition or disability, and you want to look into that specific disability and training for that. I would definitely recommend that. There will be lots of overlaps with the information I'm giving you today, but it's all good. And especially if you want to train all your staff, even better. Okay, so let's dive in and start with looking at the benefits of making your workforce more diverse. So by taking an inclusive approach, you are more likely to attract a much wider and more diverse pool of talent and experience. And for me, this is the main point, is the different perspectives and different skill sets that you could attract. So I often talk to students about coping mechanisms that they've inadvertently built up over the years of coping with a condition or a disability, and the skills, the extra skill set that can bring. So, excuse me, specifically with problem solving, with resilience and perseverance, as I think my examples of Chris and Ben have proved, emotional intelligence, adaptability, you may find an employee that has amazing creativity because they have a more non-conventional mindset, time management, organisation, influence, and etc. So many more skills. And this, of course, can provide a better understanding of the needs of a more diverse range of customers. And also, if you think about your corporate social responsibilities, by championing diversity, you can connect with the customers you serve, the people you employ, and the communities in which you operate. So let's kick off with the big question. What is disability? What does it mean to you? Now, I've purposely put this picture here because I still meet people today that when they think of disability, they think of somebody in a wheelchair. So if you'd like to unmute and have a go at this question, no pressure to do so, but would anybody like to have a go?
Looks like Sally Ann. I've just seen that you've unmuted. Did you want to explain at all?
I kind of have a bit of an advantage though, because my brother has autism and he went to a special needs school. So I've met lots of people with various different special needs from a very young age. So my perspective is very different. So I've met people with cerebral palsy. When I do my readings, I'm looking at locations of where I'm doing them and events, I'm aware of how accessible things are. So when you were saying it was still difficult, I'm like, but you can get wheelchairs on a train, you know, buses are more accessible, sign language and braille is a lot more accessible now. I see braille everywhere now where I wouldn't normally see it. And it's really interesting because my local council and Folkestone are doing more sign language on their videos and things like that, especially as things keep changing with the COVID guidelines. So it's a case of it's something that I've seen a lot more of due to who I've grown up with and the friends I have. And then I've got a hearing disability. I'm pretty much deaf in my right ear and I don't use a hearing aid. If I have to, I will, otherwise I do without it. So how I act in different situations and how I use my senses has changed very much. So I have a complete different understanding, but I also see, I appreciate mental health's different, but I also see certain mental health issues as a disability as well. So it's a case of, it's like, how big do you want your perception to be? To me, disabilities could be anything from sight, hearing, speech. It could be to do with the brain or to do with the body. Like I said, I've worked with veterans as well, so like the different disabilities they have is very different as well. So it's such a broad
so like
subject.
PTSD, is that Sally Ann, is it with PTSD?
Yeah, well for me, I experienced PTSD through domestic abuse, but there's quite a lot of crossover and therapy between how soldiers have PTSD, and not just soldiers, it's the NHS, police, 5G. So it's a case of I suppose I've just been given a much broader perspective. So to see disability as a wheelchair, it just seems very strange to me. But I suppose it depends.
There is still that view out there. Ironically, I had a one-to-one with a student who had a mental health condition, and when I mentioned that he fell under the definition of disability, which we're coming on to, he was quite horrified because he said, no, disability is somebody in a wheelchair. So you've absolutely answered it for everyone, Sally Ann, and I can see that obviously through your experience, you're really receptive to what's out there and what's accessible, and you're absolutely right, things are getting much better. I think it's probably still a challenge in London, for example, where you've only got so many underground stations with wheelchair access and lift access, and obviously with listed buildings, you know, they can't always be accessible, but things are definitely getting better, and that's what we hope for. So when you say, I'm not sure how broad to take the definition, my next slide will probably help with that, and you may have already seen this information. So the definition of disability under the Equality Act 2010 says that you have a disability if you have a physical or mental impairment which has a substantial and long-term adverse effect on your ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities. And indeed, that does include, or can include, dyslexia, autism, autistic spectrum differences, epilepsy, diabetes, mental health, and recurring or fluctuating conditions such as Crohn's or multiple sclerosis. It can also include cancer and HIV. So a lot of invisible disabilities, if you like, listed there. Now, I use these slides with students, and I like these slides as a bit of an icebreaker. Can anybody tell me what all these people have in common?
Richard Branson, I know, definitely has dyslexia.
I thought he would be the one that gives it away. Yes, because he does famously talk about being dyslexic quite a lot. So you're absolutely right. All these people here are dyslexic. And can anybody tell me who the lady is on the bottom left? Do you recognise her?
No.
Oh, good. Okay, that's actually Agatha Christie, famous novelist. Isn't that amazing? So she was believed to have dysgraphia, problems with handwriting, spelling and arithmetic. And as a result, she had to dictate all her novels. Now, I use these slides with students, as I say, in the hope that they will inspire students to say, well, you know what, all these people around you, they have also had challenges with the same condition as you, and they have gone on to be successful. So I hope that these slides are inspiring. Okay, how about this one? Now, this is everyone except Tony Blair, take him out of the equation, and Luke Skywalker. And I never know what that guy's real name is, so, but we all know Luke Skywalker, right? So mark somebody. So what do these people have in common? I can't actually see everybody, so I'm sorry if Molly's keeping an eye on everybody on the screen.
I'm keeping an eye
out.
out. I'm seeing a lot of head shaking, so
Okay.
I don't think
Is it
anybody's-
bipolar disorder?
Go broader.
Mental health?
Yes, is that Angie?
No, it's Paula.
Oh, sorry, I can only see Angie at the bottom. Yes, absolutely right. So all these famous people have either talked openly about or have been identified as suffering with a mental health condition. So we've got Abraham Lincoln there at Mount Rushmore, and he was believed to suffer with severe clinical depression. But yeah, lots of different mental health conditions, from Howard Hughes, bottom right, who suffered with OCD. There was that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio playing him, and he became a recluse, to bipolar, self-harm, depression. And yeah, you may have seen Ruby Wax or Stephen Fry talk quite openly about their mental health struggles. Okay. Right, we're going to talk about models of disability. And there are two models, the social model and the medical model. And I feel it's important that we include this so that when you use specific language within your workplace, you know that you are using it for a specific reason and you can back it up with these models. Now, I found out about these the hard way. So early on in my project, I arranged to have a big banner printed, or a big sign for a stand. And on this stand, it said, students with disabilities. And the head of Student Support, Health and Wellbeing saw it and said, no, Charlotte, you've got that wrong. And I was like, how can I have that wrong? And they said, we don't say students with disabilities, we say disabled students, because the university follows the social model. So I looked these up, and the medical model is the older traditional model, but it concentrates on what is wrong with the person and how they can be fixed with medical interventions. So the social model came about later, developed by disabled people, because they wanted to develop a more inclusive way of living. So the way I think about this is the social model says disabled people, as in disabled by society. And I think that's the easiest way to remember the difference. So as I say, the university, we use the social model as it puts the person first. This model focuses on changes required in society so that disabled people can be independent and equal in society. So thinking about changing attitudes, improving social support, more accessible formats and accessible buildings, and more flexibility, such as flexible working. So something to take away, and as I say, just to back up whichever language you choose to use. Okay, we've got a few statistics on disability here. So we actually have 7.7 million working age people in the UK that have a disability. 14% of university students have a disability. 44% of those have a specific learning difficulty. 76% of disabled students are concerned about informing a potential employer about their disability or health condition for fear of discrimination, and 71% of those feel they will be seen as a nuisance. I find that statistic really sad, and I think to me it says that students are more worried about being discriminated against, more worried than being able to do the job, which, you know, it shouldn't be that way, of course. Disabled students at all qualification levels were less likely to have obtained full-time employment than non-disabled graduates. So we find quite a high percentage of disabled students go on to do masters, further education. And those on the autistic spectrum consistently score lowest in obtaining graduate level jobs. Why do you think that is?
It's the hidden disability.
It's definitely a hidden disability, but if you think of the interview scenario, why do you think those on the autistic spectrum struggle most to get jobs? Because of course dyslexia is a hidden disability, you know, there's lots of hidden disabilities,
Yeah.
but why autism? And any thoughts?
Is it their people skills?
Yes, sorry, I can't see who's speaking. Is that Sally Ann?
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to?
Skills.
People skills.
I've got an advantage again, because I know how my brother struggles. So to talk to him and things like that, but he having to do a CV is difficult for him. Speaking about his strengths is very difficult, and I found out with a lot of autistic people, they're so busy saying, oh, I'm really, like, they apologize for things, and like what you said about what happened with one of your students, they weren't quite aware of where the library was or how to get there, so they were too busy apologizing, and they're not very good at speaking about their strengths or creating social connections. We definitely still in the UK, we live in a world of who you know, and you need to make an emotional connection with people. Autistic people really struggle with that. They struggle with social cues, so the interview process is a lot more difficult for them.
Absolutely, and actually I am going to mention autism quite a lot throughout this presentation. Yeah, there's all different reasons. I mean, I've got a friend whose son is autistic, and he was going for an interview at a mechanics, and on the day he insisted on wearing a t-shirt with a car on it because he felt that was right, but the t-shirt was dirty, and he didn't get the job. And eventually his mum sent him to me to have a word with him. So at the next interview he wore a suit and he did a lot better, thankfully. But yeah, I mean, the autistic spectrum is so broad. And I've met students. I had a one-to-one with a student who was so nervous that she literally rolled herself into a ball in front of me and couldn't speak to me. And I ended up speaking at her, and she could just about give me one-word answers. And of course, when you're stressed, that can exacerbate the characteristics of a condition. Or on the other hand, I've met students, I had a chap that came into one of my workshops and he said to me straight away, look, I am autistic, I'm also ADHD, and I talk a lot, and you may have to shut me up because I will just keep talking. And I did have to politely, but he told me, he knew that, he was self-aware, which was great. So we dealt with it, and he just talked too much. So yeah, it's so difficult, and unfortunately the statistics prove how difficult it is. So as I say, I will mention autism quite a lot throughout the workshop. Okay, so no presentation like this would be complete without at least talking about the Equality Act 2010, and I'm sure you've all heard of the Equality Act. So in 2010, the government brought together over 100 pieces of legislation into one straightforward, simple act, and that included the Disability Discrimination Act 1995. So I just got to check my notes. So this act is not about giving an employee preferential treatment, but it's about promoting a level playing field. So it's there to help tackle discrimination and inequality. So there's just a couple of pieces of information from this act that I would like you to take away today. The act protects individuals from unfair treatment and promotes a fair and more equal society. And it's actually unlawful for employers to discriminate against disabled people in their recruitment and selection procedures. Unfortunately, we know that that does still happen, but it is actually illegal. Every employer is required by law to support disabled employees by means of reasonable adjustments. And again, reasonable adjustments will keep coming up in the different subject areas. Now, if you'd like to read more about the Equality Act, there's more information on guidance for workers at the Equality and Human Rights Commission. I've put together a slide at the end that has all the links that I mention throughout the workshop, and Molly has kindly agreed to send those out to you once the presentation is finished. Now, you should also know that applicants are not required by law to disclose a disability unless there is a health and safety issue to themselves or others. However, it is a double-edged sword, because if an employee does not disclose and underperforms, they won't be covered by the Equality Act. Now, we're going to move through a kind of chronological order. So I'm going to take you from before you advertise right through to having somebody working for you in the workplace. So we're going to just think about current status of your company, and I assume some of you are here today because you want to be more disability friendly. So here are 7 easy steps that you could take on that journey. So you could appoint a diversity rep. Now, you may be a company where it's just you. So you would be the diversity rep, or even if it's just 2 of you, maybe decide between you who should be the diversity rep. Now, the reason I put this in is because when I advise students, I say to them, if you're feeling brave, you want to go for a job, ring the company and ask to speak to the diversity rep. And I do say you've got more chance with a bigger company. And I say, if the employer is comfortable with that question, then it's a positive sign for you to then apply for that job. And as I say, there's lots of training out there. It may be that you've got a member of staff that you want to give more responsibility to, or you want to help them progress. And this could be a really good way of getting them to step up, take on some, personal development and training, and become your diversity representative, I should say. You could also become a disability confident partner, or join the Mindful Employer Charter. And I'm going to speak about those in a moment. Now, with both of those initiatives, you get a logo to put on your website. And again, when I say to students, right, look for clues on if a company is disability friendly. And that's something I would tell students to look for. Look for these logos. Check the company's website, and check to see if their equality, diversity and inclusion policy is visible on the website. So make sure that is somewhere where it is easy to find. You could also organise some disability awareness training for your staff. And it's a good idea to have a look at your job descriptions and application forms and make sure that they are inclusive. And again, we're going to go through this all in order. And if you're a bigger company, you could consider setting up a disability employee network, or a DEN, and that's something we do have at Christchurch, as well as other employee networks. Can I just ask, and you can put yes in the chat, yes or no in the chat, has everybody heard of the Disability Confident campaign? No. Yes, I'm on it, lovely. No. Yeah, I normally get a lot of no's. Okay, so quite mixed, but mainly no's. Thank you. So yeah, this is quite worrying because this is a government initiative and it's been around since 2013 and it actually replaced the 2-tick scheme, which some of you may have heard of. And the idea is that MPs are supposed to campaign for this in their local areas, but haven't actually seen evidence of that. However, more than 18,000 organisations have signed up, and you can go onto the gov.uk website and you can see the whole list of organisations that have signed up. So the scheme is there to support employers to make the most of the talents disabled people can bring to the workplace. Disability confident organisations play a leading role in changing attitudes for the better. And it also helps customers and other businesses identify those employers who are committed to equality in the workplace. So I really do recommend that you look into signing up to be a disability confident partner. So it has 3 levels designed to support you at every step on your disability confident journey. And you must complete each level before moving on to the next. Now with level 1, you may find that you're already doing this, because you just have to agree to some disability confident commitments and identify at least one action that you'll carry out to make a difference for disabled people. And then level 2 is to become a disability confident employer, and level 3 to become a disability confident leader. Again, there is a link on how to join this in the slide that will be sent out. And can I just ask again, has anybody heard of the Mindful Employer Charter? If you could just put it in the chat, that'd be great. No. Yes, okay, I've got one yes. Okay. Few yeses. Encompasses. Okay, lovely. So the Charter for Employers Positive about Mental Health is about recognising those employers working towards better mental health in the workplace, no matter where they are in their journey. So signing the Charter is completely voluntary, it's not legally enforceable, and it does not require you to have already met specific benchmark criteria. By signing the Charter, employers are simply making a public declaration of their ambition to support the mental well-being of staff by agreeing to a number of values. So again, I recommend have a look at this and see if you fancy signing up to that. Right, so we're going to move on to the different stages of a recruitment process and look at being disability friendly every step of the way. So hopefully by now you're ready to advertise a vacancy, your company is more disability friendly, you've put certain steps into place and you're ready to put that advert out. So keep your adverts concise and write in plain English. Just list essential skills and avoid jargon or unnecessary information. So I think it's quite easy to pad out job descriptions with lots of skills, but if you're putting on there customer service skills needed when that person's not actually going to come face to face with any customers, then maybe it's best to leave it out. Try to be objective about what abilities and experiences are genuinely essential for the job to be done well, and leave out any that are not. Now, if the application includes an equalities monitoring form, make it clear that this is not mandatory and the answers are kept confidential from the interview panel. I've had many people, students and friends come up to me saying, oh, I have this form to fill out and it was asking me everything from am I disabled to my religion to my sexuality. And people don't always realise that that is purely for statistical purposes and you don't have to fill it out. And the interview panel should not see that information. So please just make that clear. You may actually want to give out an equalities monitoring form to meet the aims and commitments set out in your equality policy. So you can find a template for that online through ACAS. But as I said, just make it clear of the intention of that form. So we're near the bottom now. Invite candidates to request reasonable adjustments if they are selected for interview. So add that onto the application or the job advert. And you could offer any application forms in alternative formats. And again, if you go online to ACAS, they can help you with alternative formats. And I've just included a couple of examples of statements welcoming diversity that I found that I thought were strong. So company name is committed to promoting a diverse and inclusive community, a place where we can all be ourselves and succeed on merit. We offer inclusive employment policies, flexible working arrangements, staff engagement forums, as well as facilities and services to support staff from different backgrounds. And the other one is outlining some principles. We recognise the value of a workforce in which people from diverse backgrounds are encouraged to introduce fresh ideas and contribute to delivering excellent services. Staff work in a supportive and safe environment, recognising their responsibility to value and respect each other's contributions. Standards of conduct are expected to be of the highest level to ensure that no one is harassed, bullied or victimised. We are in favour of a workforce that reflects the makeup of the local population and compares well with other organisations. I believe that was from a council. I just thought it was a really good example of welcoming diversity. You could also consider completely different recruitment processes. So I've always said that an application process is about how good a writer you are, and an interview is about how well you can perform or how confident you are. So what could you do differently? So I happened to come across a company that sent in a job for our students, and they wanted it to be promoted across the university. And I said, oh, how do you want the students to apply? And this is a company in Folkestone. And this lady, Nicola, said, oh, look, here's an email address. They can apply how they wish. So I was really intrigued by this. So I said, oh, tell me more about this. And so she said, well, we just say to people, you know, apply how you want. If somebody's dyslexic, we don't want them to worry about putting in a CV that they feel isn't good enough, for example. So they did have one applicant that took them up on this, and they applied by video, and they thought it was great to get a feel for personality, fit, attitude and enthusiasm. You know, it worked for them. So that's something you could get quite creative with, I think, and just another way to consider when you're recruiting. Okay, questions you cannot ask when recruiting. It's tough for an employer. I think you're always thinking, oh my God, I mustn't say this and I mustn't say that and I mustn't put my foot in it. You know, it's nerve-wracking on both sides, I think. So you must not ask candidates about protected characteristics. And I think it's a given now that we all know that you cannot ask if somebody is married, single, or in a single civil partnership. And you cannot ask about plans to have children or if they have children. Now, the 90s or the early 90s still feel quite recent to me. And can you believe that I had a cousin in the early 90s who fell pregnant? And when she told her boss, he fired her on the spot. And you could get away with that back then. But thankfully now you can't get away with that. It's actually against the law for employers to ask applicants if they have a disability. You can only ask about health or disability if there are necessary requirements of the job that can't be met with reasonable adjustments. For example, if you're applying to become a firefighter, it's perfectly reasonable for them to ask if you suffer with vertigo, if you have a head for heights, or joining the military if you are colourblind, for example. You could also be trying to find out if someone needs adjustments to take part in a selection test or interview. So that's where you're creating that opportunity on your application form or job description for somebody to share information. So, you know, these are positive reasons, of course. You could use a positive action law to recruit a disabled person, and I'm going to speak more on that in a moment. Or, as we said before, you may ask about health or disability for monitoring purposes. So, positive action law is about taking specific steps to improve equality in your workplace. For example, to increase the number of disabled people in senior roles, which they are currently underrepresented, or including statements in job adverts to encourage applications from underrepresented groups, such as "We welcome female applicants," which you've probably already seen. You must be able to show that positive action is an appropriate way for your organisation to achieve one of these aims, and the steps you are taking have been carefully thought through. So there is a link on the resources slide that will be sent out if you are thinking of using the positive action rule of the Equality Act. Okay, CV sift. So now that you've made your company disability friendly to your external audience, you may receive CVs or applications that include a sharing of information about a disability. Obviously, it's up for you to determine who you want to interview from what is provided, but it's a good idea to have a diverse shortlisting panel that can offer different perspectives, if possible. We all see different things in people, and sometimes it takes a conversation to open our eyes to the possibilities. So I'm going to speak a little bit about disclosure because this is a really big subject for students. It was the one single thing that I got asked about the most. Should I disclose? And if I do decide to disclose, when's the best time to do it? And there's lots of opportunities, lots of different times that people can disclose. And as I say, they don't have to at all. Or they could wait until they're offered the job and then disclose. There's no law around that unless there is a health and safety issue for other people and that person themselves. So, you know, if you are having that conversation once somebody's started and they say they need time off for appointments, then you could discuss flexible working time if need be. If somebody decides to disclose at the application stage, I do encourage students to do so briefly and positively. It shouldn't define who they are, and it definitely shouldn't dominate the application process. And I ask them to try and point out the skills that their disability has helped them develop. I'm sure you're aware there are many reasons why somebody may not want to disclose, such as a fear of discrimination and unconscious bias. Big tip of the day, take a course on unconscious bias. And I believe we've had one recently, haven't we, Molly, with Mary McKinder? Yeah. I did a course, I did this course a few years ago, and I just thought it was brilliant. I still think about it today because if you're like me, I've often felt guilty that I've prejudged people too quickly. And then you do this course and you realise we're all doing it. It's just part of human nature. But it just makes you more aware of how we do prejudge and really how we're often very wrong in our prejudgment. So definitely look for that course if you haven't already done it.
Charlotte.
Hello.
Hi, it's Louise. We've also got recruitment excellence coming up with Katie and I, and part of that will also be looking at unconscious bias when you're recruiting as well. So we'll be getting it a little bit again.
Okay, so that'll go out to Kent and Victor members, will it?
Yeah,
Louise?
that's on the 21st, I think, the next one in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Okay, no, I would really recommend that. Yeah, really, really interesting subject. Now, it's very easy to make an assumption about somebody's symptoms if we know somebody else that has the same condition. Avoid making those assumptions. Now, I always remember bringing in a student, an alumna, to speak to disabled students, and she'd graduated and done really well, had a career in politics. And she came back to talk about her struggles through university when she, with Crohn's disease. And as she was talking, I sat there and I thought, oh, I know, I've got a friend who's got Crohn's, and oh, I understand this because I know what her symptoms are. And as I said that, this lady said, and I can't stand it when people assume that because they've got a friend with Crohn's that they know what I'm going through. And again, I think it's human nature. I think we all do it. And I thought, God, I'm glad I didn't speak up and say that. That would have been embarrassing. But I think, again, we assume we know the symptoms. We assume we understand. And what my project really taught me is that everybody's symptoms are completely individual to the individual. And we really need to be open-minded to that. Now, you may have somebody sharing information that's in a negative way. And I would just advise that you need to look at the rest of the application from the perspective of what can you bring to my business before you decide whether to offer an interview or not. Now, here's one example of a positive disclosure on a CV. And I always show this along with other examples to students. I have a visual impairment, full details available on request. But this has not in any way prevented me from successfully completing a demanding degree course and further education qualifications. Far from being a disadvantage, this has increased my awareness of the needs of others and has increased my determination to succeed and to persevere when obstacles are placed in my path. Would anybody like to share their thoughts on that disclosure? If you found that on a CV, how would that make you feel?
Would anyone like to give oh, Andy, I can see you've unmuted there. Did you want to give your thoughts at all?
Well, I'd definitely want to interview them, because they're already done a lot to get where they are, and they are aware, they're self-aware of what their needs are, and you know, they've shown the determination and perseverance to get to where they are. So they would definitely, in my book, be suitable, as long as everything else was okay, for an interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and this was a very popular example that I used to use, and students would always say, oh, I'm going to take that and I'm going to, you know, change it a little bit to suit me. And I'd be like, yeah, no, that's fine, that's great, as long as you don't all apply for the same job, of course, and then it's a bit obvious. But I found this one years ago and I just thought it was really powerful. Okay, moving on. So at the stage where you're inviting somebody to interview, and at every stage of the way, you'll notice that I say offer reasonable adjustments to everybody. You could also include a telephone number inviting the candidate to discuss reasonable adjustments if they wish, but they may just want to email you. And hopefully they'll do that in plenty of time. Again, I always say to students, do it as soon as you've been offered an interview. Don't do it the day before, when it may, you know, make things awkward. So when you're inviting somebody to an interview, just be really clear on everything. Offer clear instructions on how to reach the location, whether there's parking or not, or parking nearby, what kind of interview you are offering. And you could also give some tips on the dress code. If you recall my story about my friend's son that wore a dirty t-shirt with a car on, so that could be helpful. And let them know if they need to prepare anything beforehand, if there's going to be a test or if they need to do a presentation, and also if they need to bring anything such as ID. You could include who will meet them and where, so give them a name, say, "Oh, we'll meet you in reception," and provide names of the interview panel if possible. And again, in all our workshops, we advise students to have a look at the interview panel on LinkedIn, if possible. I know I've used LinkedIn myself before to check a dress code, see how people are dressed in their photos, also to look at skill sets and the language people use. It's such a great tool. And expect to have candidates look you up on LinkedIn, because of course you can see when people have viewed your profile. You could also inform the candidate of how long the interview will take, and offer the chance of an informal visit beforehand for those who need to familiarise themselves with the location or with people, or who, you know, people that may want to check accessibility to the premises. Okay, I put this in yesterday. I was going through my presentation yesterday and suddenly thought, oh my God, people will be desperate for a break, and a break from hearing my voice. So can I suggest that we go away until 11:30? Is that okay, Molly? So have 10 minutes, grab a cuppa.
Yeah, have 10 minutes, grab a drink, and it's the loo if anybody needs to, and then yeah, we can reconvene in 10 minutes. Yeah,
11:30, and then we'll continue with the recruitment journey. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, so we're continuing, and we're now at the interview stage, and I think we all agree that interviews are pretty nerve-wracking, right? So as I said before, stress can exacerbate symptoms of disability. So imagine how scary it is for somebody with a stammer, somebody who's hearing impaired, or who finds eye contact physically painful, which is the case for some people that are autistic. Hopefully by this point you have already offered reasonable adjustments and put them into place, and we'll talk about what they may look like. So a whole list here, and this is not a definitive list, of course. Reasonable adjustments requests may include a room on the ground floor that has easy access, a room with natural light or that is away from noise, a pre-interview visit so that the person can familiarise themselves with the company or check accessibility, They may ask for more time to complete a test or assessment or to deliver a presentation. And as a rule of thumb, students are given 25% more time for exams if they're on a learning support plan. You may be asked for more understanding that the interviewee's nervous disposition or anxiety is not reflective of how they would be in the workplace. I'm going to pause at this moment just to tell you about a student I met a few years ago, a female student who is autistic. And it's always said that it's harder to see autism in girls. And she told me about a time she went for an interview and she didn't share any information about being autistic, and the job had customer service skills were required for the job. So she went into the interview, she was really nervous, and she found she just couldn't make eye contact with the interviewer. And it got worse and worse until she literally closed off her body. And she said, I couldn't look past the interviewer's elbows. I just couldn't take my eyes past his elbows. So unsurprisingly, and unfortunately, she didn't get the job, but it kind of taught her a lesson. So the next time she applied for a job, she waited till she was offered an interview, and then she wrote to the interviewer and said, look, you know, I am autistic and I'm going to be really nervous, and that will affect how I act in the interview. My face may look very bored, but I want to assure you that the opposite is true, because I am really keen on this job vacancy. And she went into the interview, of course, feeling a little bit more relaxed, and she got the job. And I'm happy to say I've got quite a few examples of students that took that brave step to do a positive disclosure and they ended up getting the job. But unfortunately, I also have examples of students that did the same thing and didn't get jobs, or were actually discriminated against in an interview setting. It does still happen, and we have to be aware of that. Okay, so I'm just at the middle here. People may ask for the questions ahead of the interview, and that may shock you. And hopefully, if people are asking for the questions ahead of the interview, they are also explaining why. And that could be somebody, again, that's autistic or dyslexic, dyspraxic, somebody that struggles with processing information in a timely manner. You may be asked if a translator or a chaperone can also attend. You may be asked to avoid questions with jargon, irony, or questions that are open-ended. And as my example of the student that couldn't stop talking shows, you may be asked that the interview is brought back to the question subject if they digress or talk too much. And again, I recall a mature student, a female student, who she would often digress, and that was because she was dyspraxic, and it affected her concentration and also her coordination. You may be asked for an afternoon slot for the interview, and that could be, for example, somebody with multiple sclerosis who struggles in the mornings, or it could be somebody who's on bipolar medication, for example, and they're just a bit groggy in the mornings. But just remember that the requests must be reasonable, and that is the key word here. So, inclusive interviewing. Now, a lot of these tips are generic for any interview. So you could encourage a candidate just to take a breath or to take a sip of water if you can see that they are overly anxious. Again, I've said it a few times now, try and avoid jargon, irony, and talking in metaphors. I think that's difficult sometimes because I think the typical British sense of humour does include sarcasm quite often, doesn't it? Or even one time I spoke to a student about being headhunted, and he looked at me in absolute horror. Goodness knows what was going through his head. And he said, what do you mean, headhunted? And so I explained to him what it meant. And he was an autistic student. He took me literally. So again, something to be aware of. Smile often to help the candidate relax. And to be fully inclusive, ask each candidate the same questions in the same order. Definitely show up on time. Being late could throw a candidate. And if possible, have a diverse interview panel. So if you're a small company, maybe you'd like to invite external representatives in so that you have got more diversity on the interview panel. And try and take notes and give constructive feedback if a candidate is unsuccessful and requests it. Again, I always encourage students to be brave and ask for feedback if they don't get a job. This will help them going forward and may help them land the next job they apply for. So we're going to turn our attention once again to interviewing autistic candidates. So traditional conversational type interviews rely heavily on social communication skills. So autistic candidates may well struggle to sell themselves, even if they have all the right skills. In particular, they may face challenges with understanding body language and maintaining appropriate eye contact, knowing how to start, maintain and end conversations or answers to questions, judging how much information to give, especially if questions are open. They may struggle with thinking in abstract ways or considering what-if scenarios, and they may struggle to vary their tone of voice or to find the appropriate level of formality. Moving on to making an offer. Again, I keep saying this, offer reasonable adjustments again at every point of the way, even if you're still unaware of a disability at this point. You could offer familiarisation meetings leading up to the start date, so just to help with that transition period. And if you are aware of a disability or condition of an employee that you're about to take on, you could consider some disability awareness training for your staff. If you do require a medical questionnaire to be completed, be clear on its intention to see if any extra support needs to be put into place. And you could also offer the successful candidate the chance to have a workplace mentor. And again, as I said before, with having a diversity rep, you may have a member of staff that you want to give them a little bit of extra responsibility, give them a chance for some personal development. So becoming a workplace mentor is a really good option. Okay, question time again. Has anybody heard of the government's best kept secret, access to work? You can type yes or no. Yes, oh good. No. Yes, and I've used it. Okay. Okay, so we have got some no's there. So yeah, I mean, this was coined the government's best kept secret a few years ago. Hopefully it has changed now. And we're going to talk about this. This is another government initiative. So it's a government scheme that offers a non-repayable grant to cover all or part of the costs of workplace adjustments necessary to support a disabled employee. Now, as you can see from those reasonable adjustments I discussed at interview stage, pretty much all of those wouldn't actually cost any money, but some adjustments would. And it is up to the candidate to apply for this themselves. It's not up to the company, it is up to the candidate to do so. So the money can pay for things such as adaptations to equipment, special equipment such as assistive technology, a support worker or job coach in the workplace, a support service if the candidate has a mental health condition and are absent from work or finding it difficult to work. So I will talk about that separate support service as well. It could pay for disability awareness training for colleagues or a communicator at a job interview. You cannot justify not making a reasonable adjustment just because it costs a lot. And I should also point out that if any equipment is provided, that actually belongs to the candidate. So if they move jobs, that equipment goes with them. Okay, I'm just checking if I had anything else on access to work. Again, I have got the link at the end. And what I would say is that if somebody has shared information about a disability when you've offered them a job, let them know about access to work. Let them know that it is there, because a lot of people have never heard of it. Okay, so approaching conversations on disability. It's not easy, but I'm hoping that there's a few tips here to smooth the way. So offer a confidential one-to-one if an employee shares information about a disability. And I think a good conversation opener are questions such as, how does this affect you in the workplace? Or what are your main concerns regarding this? Or how can we support you with this? Check if the employee is aware of their rights under the Equality Act 2010. According to Scope, only 49% of employees are. And also, as I just said, you could check if they could benefit from access to work support, but it is up to them to apply for that. It's a good idea to record this information, preferably with your HR department if you have one, and make the employee aware. And you could ask for permission if you think it would be beneficial for other staff members to know, so that awareness and support is more wide-reaching. And you could also check if the employee thinks it would be a good idea for staff to do disability awareness training. And I do think that is key. And then following on from that, offer regular one-to-ones, say once a month, and check that the employee is not experiencing any discrimination from other staff members. Now, I decided to add this slide in yesterday, and this is where a few years ago I was reading a forum. It was to do with disability support, and there were lots of SMEs, small medium-sized enterprises, small companies on this forum saying that they had an employee who was on long-term sick, and it was proving really challenging for the company because they were then having to hire a temp to cover the work, and they didn't know what to do. And unfortunately, and I say this very carefully, I think we may have all heard stories of people who may have taken advantage of sick leave or sick pay, or as we say, played the mental health card, which of course makes things much more difficult for those who have a genuine mental health condition. So I decided to put in this advice just to check that you have a robust absence policy in place, and that is to protect all parties, to protect yourself if you're a business owner, but also to protect your employees. So there's some information there on what an absence policy should cover, and again that is through ACAS, and I have included the link with that information in the list of resources. So just another thing to be aware of. Now I'm going to finish up with just looking at 3 different disabilities that you may have already come across or may come across in the future. And this is by no means a comprehensive guide. I'm just going to give you some tips. And as I say, I would also recommend that you explore these in more detail if need be. So we're going to start with mental health in the workplace. Now, a few years ago, I attended some training with the charity Mind, and the trainer spoke about a continuum of mental health, and I found this really interesting. So it's important to be aware and to notice any changes in your employee's mood or behaviour, and to act sooner rather than later. For example, if someone is displaying the symptoms shown under yellow, so we've got there, if they suddenly appear worried, nervous, irritable, sad, have trouble sleeping, distracted, if they start to turn up late, for example, or they're withdrawn. If you intervene early, potentially you could prevent that person going into the red on the left or in crisis zone and going from wellness to mental illness, potentially leading to long periods of absence. So I've got an example here of how that may look. A worker's performance has recently got worse and they've started being late for work. Previously, they had a very good record of punctuality and performance. Rather than just telling them they must improve, their employer talks to them in private. This allows the employer to check whether the change in performance could be for a disability-related reason. The worker says that they are experiencing a recurrence of depression and are not sleeping well, which is making them late. Together, the employer and the worker agree to change the worker's hours slightly while they are in this situation, and that the worker can ask for help whenever they are finding it difficult to start or complete a task. And these are reasonable adjustments. So I hope that example does help. It's straightforward, but I think it's quite a powerful example. So I mentioned earlier that with access to work, there is a mental health arm of this, and it used to just be supplied by Remploy, but I notice now there are two platforms for this. There's also Able Futures. So it's a confidential service delivered by Remploy and Able Futures. It's funded by the Department of Work and Pensions and is available at no charge to any employees with depression, anxiety, stress, or other mental health issues affecting their work. So if you or your colleague would like support, there is an email address there. And you may like to, you know, make a poster out of this information and maybe put it in the toilets. I always think toilets is a good place for posters, just so that people are aware of this support service. Remploy has supported thousands of people across Britain with a 93% success rate of people retaining their employment after 6 months. So they help with things like phased returns as well. To be eligible for this service, individuals need to be in employment and have a mental health condition, diagnosed or undiagnosed, that has resulted in workplace absence or is causing difficulties to remain in work. So we're now going to move on to looking at dyslexia in the workplace. And so I'm including quite a few little tests today, aren't I? So this slide could be more inclusive in at least 8 ways, but can you spot how? Now, this slide looks pretty awful to anyone, I think, but would look particularly awful to some people that have dyslexia. So you can either speak up or chat, you can type in the chat. Can you see 8 ways that this slide could be more inclusive?
So we had colours in the chat.
Oh yes, colours, yeah, absolutely. Any other ideas? Different fonts, yeah. Font same colour, colours the same. Flowers distracting, absolutely. Flowers, the writing, different colours, different font, capitals, noisy background, yeah, absolutely. Okay, I am going to give you the answers in a moment. Any more? Spaces between paragraphs, yeah, it's rather text heavy, isn't it? Busy, underlined word, yeah. Colour background may be better for some, definitely. Brilliant. I think between you've pretty much got them all there. Now hold on, I've got a list here. Okay, so shouty capitals, I like that. Absolutely. So let me go to how this slide could look better. Same slide, same information, different slides. So the advice is to avoid green, red and pink writing, and that's for people with colour blindness. Dark writing on a light background is best, but white can be too dazzling. So consider cream or pastel shades for visual stress. So I hope you can see, because I did put all my slides in a kind of cream buff colour. And when I used to print handouts for students, I used to do them in an array of pastels. And that always went down really well, because students would often say to me, oh, great, you've got my colour, you've got pink, or you've got my colour, pastel green. And I believe that when people are diagnosed with visual stress, they're often given what the best colour is for them for comfort. So that's also a good tip. Now this one is sans serif font. If I can just go back, the one before, I think I used Times New Roman. And it's if I just put can you see my cursor? Can you see my cursor moving? So it's these little swishes, can you see, on the ends of the letters that can be problematic for dyslexic people. So a sans serif font, do you see it doesn't have those swishes on the ends, so they're easier to read. And as you all rightfully pointed out, avoid capitalizing, avoid italics. I'm not sure if that one came up. Don't center the text and break up heavy text into chunks. Don't use distracting pictures, but do consider using them in place of text sometimes. I'm going to speak about that in a moment. Think about spacing and font size, and avoid columns like in a newspaper. And if you can just take those simple tips and use them for all your resources, emails, presentations, web pages, then that is really showing that you are being inclusive. Okay, so we mentioned Richard Branson earlier, and I found a clip online a few years ago about him doing a TED talk, and there was a story that really resonated with me, so I'm going to share that story with you now. Richard Branson famously talks about being dyslexic and has previously listed it as one of his greatest strengths. In his 50s, he was in a board meeting being taken through some financial figures when the subject of net and gross came up. He was confused, having never admitted that he didn't understand the difference between net and gross. Isn't that unbelievable when you think how rich he is? As a dyslexic, he'd been hiding his muddling of words and numbers well for years. One of his team noticed that he was struggling with this and took him outside and showed him a simple way to understand it. He coloured a piece of paper blue, indicating the ocean, and put a net in the ocean with fish in it. He then explained that the fish in the net were the net profits, and the rest of the ocean was the gross turnover. This was a revelation to Richard, although he also realised at the time that he was poorer than he thought. So I just like that story. And I've included this slide just to show that specific learning difficulties is an umbrella term that dyslexia comes under. So all of these conditions that you can see are neurological in origin and can adversely impact the learning and processing of information, but are not an indication of intellect. It should also be understood that each person will experience different characteristics of each condition, as we discussed earlier. For example, someone with dyslexia may suffer with short memory recall, while the next person could struggle with spelling, or someone with dyspraxia may struggle with coordination, and the next person may struggle with concentration. If you'd like to learn more about these specific learning differences, please see the link on the slide that's going to go out. And you'll also notice that autistic spectrum condition is also there, and it points out that it's not seen as a specific learning difficulty, but a high percentage of people that are autistic also have a specific learning difficulty as well. And that's certainly true of the students I have met. And we're going to finish by taking a quick look at autism in the workplace. And this is a quote that I found online. Autistic people have some very valuable skills which can be applied in the workplace. They might have very good attention to detail or be really good at sticking to routines and timetables. Therefore, they are likely to be very punctual and reliable. Everyone has different skills, but there will always be something. So as well as their individual strengths and talents, autistic candidates often demonstrate above average skills in some or all of the following areas. Very high levels of concentration. The young lady I spoke about earlier who went for the job interview and couldn't look past the chap's elbows, I always remember her telling me that she had these high levels of concentration that meant that she would study for hours all day and then suddenly realise that it was nighttime and she hadn't actually eaten, because she would just get so lost in her concentration and or doing repetitive tasks and just not notice the time passing. Also reliability, conscientiousness and persistence, accuracy, close attention to detail and the ability to identify errors, technical abilities such as in IT, detailed factual knowledge and an excellent memory. So autism is a lifelong developmental disability that affects how people perceive the world and interact with others. To me, autism has often been described as the brain being wired differently. So imagine how this could help your business in terms of fresh thinking, problem solving, innovation, and possibly creativity, although it mustn't be assumed that every autistic candidate is Rain Man or can look at a panoramic view and then sit down and paint it from memory. The autistic spectrum is broad, as we've said, so different people will need different levels of support. You may also want to consider a work trial so that the interview experience is not necessary. Some employers find that a work trial or a period of work experience is a better way of assessing skills than a formal interview. This approach may also help if you think that an autistic person is likely to do well in a job, but you have concerns about how well they will cope in the workplace. If you would like to take this approach, the National Autistic Society's Employment Training Service can offer support and advice. Now, I think, oh no, sorry, I have one more slide, I believe. So just thinking again about reasonable adjustments in the workplace for autistic candidates. It could be simple things such as having a quiet space away from busy corridors or lots of noise, or you could offer ear defenders to help with concentration. You may find that the employee sometimes appears rude, inappropriate, or gets into people's personal space. Just take them to one side and gently explain the boundaries. Offering clarity and structure in all aspects of the workplace can be helpful. And if need be, just repeat the instructions regularly until it goes in. Offer regular one-to-ones to review performance and to allow for confidential discussions. And there is a link for the National Autistic Society who offer further training. Okay, this is the slide that I'm going to send to Molly. And Molly's kindly said that she will send that out. So I didn't want to overwhelm people with lots of information, but these are basically all the links that I have mentioned throughout the presentation. Okay. And my email address is there, and I am aware that some questions have been asked and have gone up as we've chatted more. So I want, feel free to email me if you have a specific question, or we've got some time now to have a discussion. If anybody wants to put some questions to me now, and I will try my best to answer them. And if I can't, I will find out the information and email you.
Thank you so much. I know that we had a question here earlier from Ellie, which was a good question. She said, what should you do if you get a hidden disability after working in the business already, for example, 2 years or so? It may change your work situation.
That's a really good question, actually, because I think there is, again, I think I've seen a statistic where most disabilities are acquired later in life. And so a lot of people find themselves in that situation. And hopefully, is it Ellie, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, if you find, I think first of all, you've got to think, does it affect me in the workplace? And if the answer is yes, and you think you could do with some reasonable adjustments, hopefully you could have a confidential chat with your line manager, or if you didn't feel that was the case, if you're in a larger company, it's easier to go higher then, isn't it? It could be a conversation you have with your HR department. But I think my first stop would be with the line manager and ask for a confidential chat, and hopefully.
Does anybody else have any questions at all?
Helen's got a question.
Yeah.
I can see on the chat.
Hi, yes, thank you. Really interesting session. I have an inquiry about the work that I do. So I'm a trainer in wellbeing, and I very much concentrate my work on keeping people well. So I concentrate on wellbeing, both physical and mental, as opposed to mental illness. Which is something that I make a very clear distinction on with a lot of the employers that I work with. But I do also try and persuade my employers that if they treat everybody with the same level of respect and inclusivity and equality, that they will just generally have a much better working environment, and they'll cater to many more people's needs than if they try and have systems in place for people who they know to have a disability, although they must have that, but they should treat everybody in a much more inclusive way, because there will be people within their organisations who are withholding information for fear of discrimination. So just to do better for everybody, really. One of the reservations that has come up has been about promoting people within an organisation if they have a mental health condition, because their fear for some of their people is if they're already struggling with anxiety, with depression, with being overwhelmed, and they get put into a more responsible position, how will they cope with that? What would be your thoughts on a situation like that?
Yeah, God, do you know what? I think mental health is one of our biggest challenges, I have to admit. And I think what you said before about getting everybody to be more inclusive and you know, practicing good equality, I think is, as I say, I think it's really key. And I think sometimes if every company could introduce disability awareness training so that all staff have had the same training, I think we would just come on leaps and bounds with inclusivity. Gosh, that is such a difficult one, because I think you'll agree there is still very much a stigma attached to mental health, isn't there? And possibly because it is an invisible disability. And also, as I said, it hasn't helped before when, unfortunately, there are people that do take advantage of sickness benefits, and that doesn't help the people with genuine conditions. So I've got to be honest, I haven't got an answer to that. I can do some searching around.
I can.
And try and find an answer. Louise, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, sorry. Hi, Helen.
Hi.
Can't see me, I'll take my video off. We have a session coming up with Gradforce on mental health in the workplace. Got some really good people that are going to be delivering that.
And I should know that because I brought them in.
You did, Charlotte. I was waiting and waiting and waiting. Charlotte recommended them. Didn't like to say that, but no, they're really, really good. But also following on from their session, if you want us to then enable your organisation, small or large, it doesn't matter, to do the mental health first aid course, then we can also help facilitate that. This is the first introduction from this company, who don't do the certificate stuff. They just give you a really good introduction, and I've got it on Charlotte and Amber or Katie's authority. Was it Katie's?
Katie, yeah, Warrior Kind, isn't it? In
Warrior Kind, are really, really good. So they're going to do the session after the next one, I think, Molly, isn't it? Which will be May, on the 5th of May. But on that, we will also ask companies if they want to then look at doing the mental health first aid in the workplace certificate. Then Gradforce can help facilitate you to do that for all.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
So look out for that, and we'll make sure. Oh, look, Molly's done it now. For that session. So all our sessions are we have a method to our madness, if you like. So in terms of how they flow and how they, you know, how you can think about recruiting and how you can deal with this and unconscious bias, etc. So that one is coming up. So Molly's posted a link now. Thank you, Molly. So hopefully you can come along, Helen. If not, please feel free to contact us anyway, and we can do what we can to help it.
And thank you very much.
Is that okay? Sorry,
yes,
Charlotte.
Right,
thank you.
No, that's good. I'm glad you reminded me, because my memory is shocking. I can see a question there about what about churches or religious organisations? That's a really interesting question, and not one I've ever been asked before. Could I ask, I mean, with the advice that's already been given, would your church or religious organisation, would they do some training? Would they accept something like disability awareness training for the church members? Is that something that would be possible? You can either speak or type if that's easier.
Hello, it's Gospel here. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can, Gospel, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm just asking if everything that you've said, if it also applies to churches or religious organizations like the synagogue, the mosques, things like that. Are they also supposed to adhere to this, and not just companies and organizations?
Well, any employers, I mean, well, no, actually, the Equality Act is for the UK, but it's not in Northern Ireland. They've got their own act or policy, I guess. So the Equality Act applies to the workplace, of course, and to employers, but it also applies to services. So from that, I would assume that it does apply to those organisations. But Gospel, can you leave that with me so that I can find out for sure? But
Can I say something again as well?
Go for it, Louise.
Hi, Gospel. I mean, most churches or church-based organisations have a board of leaders or trustees, or and yes, I mean, under, like Charlotte said, under safeguarding or various other sort of guises, really, or good practice, I would expect a management board or leaders, whatever your church call your leaders, to take some responsibility for ensuring that they're all aware of people with disabilities, people with mental health. It's probably something that they should be seeking out, but perhaps don't seek out. But yes, they should. We all have a responsibility to safeguard, whether it's our congregation, our employees, whatever. So I would absolutely address it and say, you know, this is out here. It might be worth, you know, holding a session for the leaders of the church, or the whoever is, whatever you call them within your church, because they varied across the denominations. But I've worked for several church-based organisations, just about to go and work for another one. But even just as an ordinary church, if you like, then yes, that's something that could be applicable, definitely. But like Charlotte says, we can look into that further and discuss that outside of this with you if you want us to help you with that, because I'm sure we can, can't we, Charlotte? So
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you. I did have one other question, but perhaps maybe another time I'll ask it. Thank you.
Yeah, Gospel, you've got my email address still on the screen, right?
Yeah.
So please feel
yes,
free to email me.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. It looks like I can't see any other questions in the chat at the moment. I think if there are any other questions, I mean, Charlotte's email address is still on the screen there. So if everyone's happy to send that any questions over straight to Charlotte. Obviously, I'll send out the resources as well for you all. I think that gives our event to a bit of a close now. So
can I just say something, Molly?
Yeah, of course.
Please.
My
name's Sue Hall. I'm chair of the Kent and East Sussex branch of the Institution of Civil Engineers, and in my year in office I've been organising monthly presentations by engineers and engineering technicians who have physical, mental and emotional impairments. Obviously that's the reason I came in today. So if anybody who is working as an engineer or an engineering technician who has one of these physical, mental or emotional impairments and would like to promote themselves within the industry, I'd be more than happy to have people contact me so we can have a discussion. I've had a gentleman with speech impediment, I've had a gentleman with autism and partial sight impairment. I've had a lady with ADHD and a speech impediment, and I've got a gentleman who's in a wheelchair coming up in May. These are going on sort of towards the end of every month on the Institution of Civil Engineers website. So if anybody wants to join in, it's not members only, it's free to anybody, and just go to the ICE website and log in, well, not log in, go to the events page and find the relevant presentation that's going on. They are happening monthly, and the next one is the 19th of May. But if there is anybody here today that is or knows somebody that's working as an engineer or an engineering technician who would like to be able to speak to people about the struggles they've had through their working life, the achievements they've made, we want to celebrate with them.
Would that apply to our graduates as well, Sue, and our students? Because obviously GradForce works solely with underrepresented groups, and we do have some with, you know, hidden disability, but we have a brand new engineering school, which I'm sure Charlotte was going to hold a flag up for as well.
Louise, I was just going to suggest if we put Sue in touch with Anne Norcliffe, who's our founding head of our engineering school.
I know Anne.
Well, there you go.
Yes, I do, yes.
And Anne is very open about the fact that she is dyslexic herself, and she's really making great strides for equality for women in science, for example. And I think, well, if you know her, I don't suppose I need to put you in touch with her then.
Well, funnily enough, she did a presentation for me in one of my ladies' events.
that I'd organised,
Okay.
but I haven't been in touch with her since about this.
Well, I think doing it the other way round and talking to our students and our graduates, I think would be a really good event to have with the Edge Hub engineering school as well, because I think a lot of our disabled students, whether it be hidden or visible, probably might, shy away from applying for engineering, and right now they need all the good marketing they can get to attract new students, because it's a brand new hub, it's a brand new engineering school. So I think you're right, Charlotte. I said maybe that's a different conversation you have with her, Sue, in terms of upping the ante on their marketing, in terms of making it more, we've been working a lot with Kent Police at Gradforce on a similar theme, to enable people to know they can go into the police. You don't have to be a police officer. There are other roles available regardless of disability or whatever. So I would say maybe Charlotte, you and Sue connect together and speak to Anne about maybe holding some sort of event, relating to the graduates, and particularly as the new ones are starting to apply soon, to put a marketing campaign out, I would say would probably be a really good idea.
Brilliant. I'll email you, shall I, Charlotte?
Yes, please do. That would be great.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. And Sue, I'm so sorry, because I know in the chat I said we'll come to you next and I got completely sidetracked. So I'm really glad you interjected there, and so sorry. But I think that does give our event a massive close now. So thank you so much, Charlotte. That was a really, really great session. I'm seeing lots of praise in the chat here as well. So thank you so much for your time and for the information today.
You're welcome, and nice to meet everyone, albeit online.
Yeah, thank you so much for everyone for joining today, and we'll hopefully see you all again soon.
Thanks, Charlotte.